To get started, we need an HTML page. I've created this HTML5 page by extracting the HTML from one of my blog posts and simplifying it. While it may be simplified from what's online, it's still not exactly simple. So let's go through it quickly. We'll begin by turning on line numbers. On line 1, we see the new HTML5 doc type. On line 4, the header begins, and in that our title. On line 8, the body begins. The first thing in the body is an article representing a blog post, and it has an ID. We're going to talk about IDs in depth, but the idea behind an ID is that it uniquely identifies this selector. This particular article has the ID post 5946. Below that is a section. It's the first section within the article, and it too has a unique ID. This is going to be the header for the article. We have an H1 that's a header 1, and that has a class. Class is the other side of the coin for ID. You can have many selectors with the same class, and this allows you to apply your style to that class across different types of selectors. Our H1 says 8th Pluralsight course, HTML5 from scratch, and ends with a close tag. We then have a general div on line 13, and its class is entry meta, indicating this is where the metadata is. And then we have some spans, each with their own class, that indicate when this was posted. On line 18, the first section ends, and on line 19, the second section begins with its own class. On line 20, we have a blank line, a paragraph with just a non-breakable space in it. On line 21, we have some text in a paragraph, and that also has a link and an image. The next paragraph begins on line 26, which has a link and then some further text. Let's scroll down. We see the section end, and we see an aside begin. Asides are typically used for sidebars or for additional information about the text. This sidebar, or this aside, has two sections. The first begins on line 34, which is the header for the aside, and in there is an H2. And on line 38 is the second section in the aside. And we have filled that with some Greeking. On line 49, we start closing out the section, then the aside, then the article, and we come to a footer. And in the footer is a paragraph, copyright 2013 Jesse Liberty. Let's run this in, for example, Internet Explorer. And IE has made some guesses about how to format some of this. So you see that the headers are bold and the links are underlined. It has picked a default font, and all of the non-header text is the same size. We can now write our first style sheet to adjust this page and to get a sense of what style sheets are like and how you identify areas in the page. Let's minimize the browser. We'll go up to the top of the page, and we're going to do an inline style sheet. As noted earlier, most professionals will use external style sheets for production, but internal style sheets while building the page to avoid problems with browser caching. To create a style sheet, we'll go into the head below the title, and we'll put in style, and it automatically creates me a closing style tag. If your editor doesn't do that, you'll want to do that for yourself so that you don't forget to have the closing style tag. The first tag that we're going to address is the paragraph tag. I'd like to set how all of my normal text is going to look. So I use the P selector, open and close brace, and inside the open and close brace, I can put my property value pairs. The first thing that I'm going to do is to set the color to black, and I can do that with the hex value 00, 00, 00. This is red, green, blue in hex. Semicolon to indicate the end of the property. Then I'll set the font size, and there are a number of ways to set this. We can set an absolute size, a relative size, a percentage, pixels, and so on. I'm going to use a relative size of medium, and then I'll set the font family. And because I've been working in Windows 8, I'm very fond of Sego UI, so I will set that as my font family. I can bring up IE and immediately see the changes. Now these changes will be slightly subtle, but let's bring up IE, refresh it, and we can see the font has changed to Sego UI. Let's go ahead and adjust what our headings look like. The H1 heading is going to have a color, and let's set that color to something really clear and bold. We'll go ahead and set that to red. Web Matrix lets me pick that right out of a color picker. And I think what I want is fully red, so FF0000. And then I'm going to set the font size to extra large. And once again, I'll set the font family to Sego UI. Now, we will discuss later in this course how to avoid duplicating setting all of the font families to Sego UI, but for now we'll go ahead and do that in each of these. And for H2, I'm going to copy and paste what I have for H1 and then modify it. So we'll say for the second level header, the color will be blue. So no red, no green, but all blue. And we'll set the size, instead of X large, we'll set the size to larger and leave the font family Sego. Finally, I have a footer. And remember that in the footer, I have a paragraph. So I'm now going to use a somewhat more complex selector. And again, we will talk about these as we proceed, but this is our first style sheet, so let's get a feel for what can be done. I'll say footer and then P, and that indicates any paragraph within a footer. And for that, I'm going to set the font size to extra small. Let's save the style sheet and bring back IE and refresh it. And notice that all of our changes have taken place. Our first header is larger and red. Our second header, about HTML5, is larger than the text but smaller than the first header. And our copyright notice in the footer is nice and small. That's your first style sheet. In coming modules, we will discuss how to work with all of the selectors, the different types of selectors, to pick out precisely what you're looking for.